Hello fellow audiophiles, I am Wave Theory and I have in my hand right here 0.5% of all of the final D8000 limited edition units ever made. Alright, so this again is the final D8000 Pro limited edition. There were only 200 of these ever made. This was a loan from a friend of the channel who bought it used. And sent it to me for review. So this review is going to be a little bit different because you can't really just go out and buy one of these brand new anymore. They started at $4,800 US as their retail price. So these you basically have to snag when they come up used. So I'm going to try to frame this review kind of in that direction of if this comes up for say around $3,000, which the friend who bought this tells me that is about the going rate on the used market for these right now. But so if it comes up for sale at about $3,000 US, should you be interested in that? Should you want to snag one? So hopefully we'll keep this review a little bit shorter because the fact that you can't just go out and buy one of these does mean that it's probably not necessary to go into all of the nuances. So come back after shameless self-promotion and we will mostly talk about sound. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
All right, to try to just sum up quickly, I think the takeaways that I'm about to give you, and then stick around if you're interested to find out all the nuances behind this opinion, is that for me, no, this would not be a $3,000 used purchase, but there is enough going on in this thing's favor that I think there will be a fair number of you out there that if you see this, you might be interested in picking it up and seeing if it is right for you. So let's kind of unpack all of that. So real quick, just to try to say, what is this thing? Where does it come from? This is a slight tweak of the final D8000 Pro. It's got a little bit different color scheme on it. They put different pads on it and made a couple of other tweaks to it. And then they also included this silver-plated OFC copper. So it's a silver-plated copper cable that was like a $600, $700, maybe even $800 add-on to the final D8000 Pro that they included in the package with the limited edition. And then the limited edition package sold for $4,800 US when it launched, as compared to $4,300 US for the original Pro version of the D8000. All right, the rated impedance on this thing is 60 ohms with a rated sensitivity of 98 decibels per milliwatt and all of that. So it's not super easy to drive, but also it's not super difficult to drive either. That 60 ohms is middling. That's right around where the Susvara sits. It's right around where the Diana TC sits in terms of impedance load, but it's more efficient. This one is much more efficient than those other two by about 20 to 30 decibel per milliwatt on there. So it drives a lot more efficiently at that impedance than those others do. But you do need a little bit of amp power to get it to sing. The D8K Pro LE comes in this pretty nice hard shell, I mean, almost a suitcase. So let's open that up, take a look inside here. And push open. There we go. Now it locks into place. And here we go. Like a little cleaning cloth. And actually, that's not a cleaning cloth. That's a folder with some documents in it, I think. Anyway, okay, more info right here, but the headphone sits nicely tucked into this space. Here we have a OFC copper 4.4 millimeter Pentacon balanced connector, and then this is the fancy schmancy cable that did not come with the old D8000 Pro, but did come with the limited edition version. And you see you've got these locking 3.5 millimeter connectors here on the headphone, and this cable was about a $600-$700-ish option, I think, but it came with this unit factored into the price. Anyway, this is a very nice carrying case. It's not portable friendly at all, but just thought you should see it and see that presentation. let's go ahead and turn here like right away towards like what signal chains did I check this on, and then like what are my sonic impressions for this and why. So I almost exclusively used this cable that came with it. One, the locking connectors on it do limit the number of cables that you can fit into this thing. I did have my Lavra Cables Grand Silver fit this okay, but I didn't like how that one sounded quite as well as I liked this cable that came with it, so I ran with this cable. All right, the two DACs that I use primarily as source gear here would be my Chord Hugo 2, which would have been fed by its matching 2Go streamer. And then I also used my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, which would have been fed by a Singer SU6, in turn being fed by a Sonor Ultra Rendu. And then both of those devices that or all of those signal chains there would have been Rune endpoints. We're listening to lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files locally, or streaming lossless or high-res FLAC files from Qobuz. All right. A variety of headphone amps that I tried on this one. I just got the Schiit Mjolnir 3 in for review, so I tried that on here. And then I also tried my Headamp GSX Mini, the HiFiMan Golden Wave Prelude, the Vioelectric HPA V281, and I still have the LTA MZ3 around on a very long-term loan from a friend who has graciously let me hang on to it for a while, and I was able to try this on here too. All right. What did I learn through all of that, and how does that answer the question about if this comes up used at a price you're comfortable with, should you jump on it? Well, let's see if this sound description fits your tastes here. So, the sound signature on this is mostly neutral with a little bit of mid-range forwardness, mid-range emphasis to it. Okay, the tonality through the mid stands out to me as being not quite as even as it is in the bass or the treble, and the result is that things like vocals and stringed instruments and pianos and that sort of thing have a little bit more presence to them, and they come forward a little bit more than what a true neutral would be, or what many other headphones, or at least headphones that I like, do. There are a number of mid-forward headphones out there, even in this price range, but this one is one of those more mid-forward presentations. Now, for the most part, it avoids sounding honky or shouty to me. It also avoids just some of the hollowness and all that I detected with the original Pro version of the D8000 line. And it's not as grainy through the mids as my memory of that Pro version was either. So it's not quite as forward as the OG Pro. It's not quite as grainy through the mids as the OG Pro, but it still is there a little bit. Okay, so if you like that kind of mid-forward sound, then this might be something you would be interested in checking out if you get the opportunity. The bass extension here I did not find to be all that spectacular. It's not poor, but it doesn't quite have that planar linear bass where it just is flat and extends all the way down to 20 hertz. It does have a bit of a roll-off below about 50-ish hertz, I want to say, that is noticeable on some tracks. Like Hans Zimmer's Mountains has that descending bass line, and that can disappear a little bit more quickly on this one than it does on some other top-of-the-line models and all of that. Okay, but the treble tonality is very good extension up there, but though I do notice at times and on some signal chains that it can tend towards sibilance every now and then. It's not terrible, and when it does get a little bit sharp on like S's and T's and that sort of thing when a vocalist is singing, it's not particularly piercing, but it is there and present enough to like kind of pull me out of the moment and like just to kind of lose that sense of realism and all of that comes through in the timbre there in the top end. All right, so that's kind of the tuning and the tonality of it and that sort of thing. The overall presentation here on it is a mixed bag, because there are some sonic things that this thing does very, very well. But the problem is like it doesn't do kind of the whole thing well enough all of the time and across enough signal chains for me to like fully endorse it. So what do I mean by this? Like this thing can sound really great with like bass timbre. Electric bass guitars sound really wonderful through this thing, have a high degree of realism on it, very similarly to like what the original D8000 Pro has on it, right? So that trait from the D8000 Pro made it into this limited edition and is very good. pianos, even with that mid forwardness and all that, pianos and drums and that sort of thing can also sound really, really good on this thing. Just because of the way that forwardness comes through, it just matches a lot of piano and drum sounds really well. Like snare drums and all of that have a really nice, healthy snap to them and that sort of thing on it. Now, so there are things that it does very well. Cymbals can sound very natural and all of that as well on good recordings and on a good signal chain. Okay, and we've got to talk signal chain, so we'll get to that in just a moment. But like so it does a lot of things well. Some of the issues is that what it does really well changes from amp to amp in particular. It seemed, at least in my testing, and I only really had the 2 high-end DACs that I could really try this with, but in my testing, it's fairly sensitive to amp changes, and putting it on different amps changes the different areas of the signal spectrum and like different kinds of instruments and all of that it's good at. And I couldn't quite find the right amp combination for it that just made it sound good across the board to where to the point where I could just kind of forget for periods of time that I was listening to a recording and a reproduction and just enjoy the music. So let me kind of unpack all of that here a little bit. Just to kind of like put a broad picture on it, or paint with a broad brush here initially. Like my favorite amp for this one overall was the LTA MZ3. I would say the Vio V281 came next. After that would be the Headamp GSX Mini, then the Prelude, and then the Mjolnir 3. And like, so, and what I noticed testing with all 5 of those amps is that this thing, again, the amp sensitivity is very real and it's very there. Now, it's not picky like a Utopia is. Like you plug in a Focal Utopia and you put that on the wrong signal chain for it and it will scream at you, right? It just is very unhappy very quickly and it makes for a very unpleasing listening experience. Something like the Hi-Fi-Man Susvara, you put that on the wrong signal chain for it and it just sounds a little bit soft and mushy and not as quite as coherent or as holographic as it normally does when it is properly powered, and then it also loses a lot of its dynamic impact. But it is much nicer. It's not like the Utopia. It doesn't scream at you. It's just like, it's a lot nicer. It's a lot more pleasant when it starts to go awry. I've likened it before to like the Utopia. If you ask the Utopia question, have I put on some weight? It will say to you, put down the fork, Lardo. Okay? Whereas if you ask the Susvara if you've put on a little weight, it will say, you know, you've been under a lot of stress, so you might have added a few pounds, but it's okay, we'll get through this. Okay, just kind of a little bit different approach here. This one is in the middle of those 2 approaches. It never quite gets quite as angry with you on the signal chain changes as the Utopia does, but it's not as nice as the Susvara, and that can really vary the experience. Okay. On the Mjolnir 3, I thought the mid-range forwardness and uneven tonality that I talked about came forward the most and got the most in the way. That one also had the most sibilance in the sound. So I didn't particularly like the Mjolnir 3 on this for most program material. The next one I tried, the Prelude. Now, the Golden Wave Prelude, sold by Hi-Fi-Man, is quickly becoming one of my favorite amps and a new reference for me just because it does so many things well and drives everything because it has a prodigious amount of power. But it just didn't quite pull it all together on this one because I think that mid-forwardness got in the way a little bit. Again, the sibilance was also there, not quite as bad as the Mjolnir 3, but then like the spatial presentation of it just didn't quite have the coherence that I got on some of the other amps that I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. Such as, oddly, the Headamp GSX Mini. Like, I plugged this one into the Mini because the Mini can be very unpredictable in terms of how it's going to match to a headphone. Like, some headphones that I ordinarily don't like or that struggle with a lot of signal chains, I put on the Mini and it sounds great, like the Fostex TH900 series being a prime example of those. And then there are other headphones that that I normally like that it just will not match well to. So I wondered if any magic would happen here with that one. And it was better than the Prelude and the Mjolnir 3, oddly enough, but it still wasn't my favorite. I thought the Mini actually helped control that mid-range forwardness a little bit more, but it didn't quite have the fullness or the realism in the bass that the Prelude and some others had, but it also, like, it struggled the most with sibilance. But even with that, the spatial presentation on this one was like more coherent than the ones before and all of that. I just ended up enjoying the Mini's presentation with this a little bit more than the Prelude, and definitely more than the Mjolnir 3. Moving up to the Vio HPA V281, the warmth and the fullness and the thickness of the V281 really paired to this well. The V281 also relaxes the mids a little bit, and that paired to this well, I think. And there was still that sibilance and all of that, but like the spatial presentation just wasn't quite there for me too. Like, it didn't quite have the depth and all of that I would like, and there were always just little bit elements of the sound that just didn't quite sound quite right to me. The MZ3, which is a tube amp, it had the most even tonality through the mids and the treble easily. Like the forwardness in the mids, shout, honk, hollowness, and all of that was rare on that one, as was the sibilance. It wasn't never, but it became a lot more rare. But the bass fullness and presence wasn't quite there. But even without that, I just like this one, it got in the way the least on the MZ3, in my opinion, of those amps that I tried there. So for me and for my ears, there was just always something in the presentation of this one that just got a little bit in the way. And it kind of frustrated me because it was never outright poor. It was never one of those things where I just wanted to rip it off my head and say never again. It was always good enough to want me to keep trying to get used to it and to like just let go and enjoy the music and that sort of thing. But I couldn't. I just couldn't quite get there like I can get there with my Susvara when it's properly powered, or the Utopia when it's on a good chain, or my HE1000 SE when it's on a decent chain and it's a lot more signal chain friendly and all that. Like, so for me, this is not cracking that trio of Susvara, Utopia, HE1000 SE for my personal taste, things that I really like and that I can trust to do for review work and all of that kind of thing. It's not breaking into that group for me. But this does enough things well and has a presentation that I know is popular out there. A lot of you like that more forward vocal presentation and forward mid-range and that sort of thing, because that helps you bring out, appreciate the nuances in vocal performances and stringed instruments and all of that kind of thing. Okay. And so if you have a decent signal chain and all of that and are willing to put up with some of this thing's finickiness to get that signal chain dialed in, then at $3,000 used, or hopefully at cheaper as time goes on, like, I can definitely see this working for a lot of people. I'm just not one of those people. All right. So I hope that is enough info here on the final D8000 Pro limited edition to help you see if you want to spend time seeing if one pops up on the used market and snagging that and building a signal chain around it. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. I'm Wave Theory. This has been my sort of review of the final D8000 Pro limited edition. Thanks for watching. Please remember to check out my PayPal, my Patreon, and generally check out those things that you can do to support YouTube channels, like liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, all of that stuff. So thanks again for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.